G'day and welcome back to Critical AFL on YouTube for this final look at the draft for West Coast before round one opens tomorrow evening. Already we've seen what West Coast is doing right at the top end of the draft, picks 1 and 2. We know who's linked to the club towards the back end of the draft, including those post-draft mechanisms even, like rookie listing. So we're really going to take a look today at who will be coming in and then how many question marks are left on the table outside of the guys that we're pretty confident about. Funnily enough, for me, I personally think that we've only got one really impossible to answer question left at the moment, which is who we take at pick 13. And honestly, for this year's draft, I don't think anybody, including West Coast, has any certainty on who that's going to be, which I'm going to try and break down in this video and why that is. But before that, I'm going to try and make a point of putting the word out to all the new viewers of this channel and my videos to please consider hitting the subscribe button if you haven't already. I've noticed a shift in the audience since the end of the AFL season, now that the trade and draft content's been coming out. But for all those who are new, I do cover weekly AFL and waffle reviews during the season. Trade and draft coverage, as well as the off-season content, which will be tracking players, setting up for the upcoming year, and everything else in between. So if you like to consume West Coast updates in this format on YouTube and videos, the content is here all year round, which means let's get back to the draft. Now, let's take a look at today's pre-draft coverage. Firstly, to begin with, we'll do a quick overview of all the selections we've got at the draft, which I've done before, and then what we'll be doing with each of those. Then we'll take a look at who's tied to the club after the draft in the rookie listing, which is actually going to be really important, and then how I think that will impact some of the decisions, especially in the midfield department tomorrow night. Then finally, I'm going to take a little look at where I think we'll be at the end of the list management part of this season, which will also include some talk of who we move during the trade period also. So let's start with the draft. At this point in my draft coverage, I'm going to make a little bit more of a quick session for the first two picks because I've covered them already lots of times. So like I've said all along, the likelihood of us splitting either picks 1 or 2 is very low. And then in the last few days before this draft has come along, that's been all but confirmed by those who are connected to the clubs, player managers, and just all the bigger rumours that fly around. So it looks like that's more or less been put to bed, even though it's been floated. So with the 2 picks in hand, it's also quite close to set in stone that we'll be taking the same guys I say every time. Willem Dersma, utility, hybrid mid-forward, and Cooper Duff-Tytler, the ruck who also plays forward quite well with those 2 picks. Rather than lingering on player profiles, which I've done, I do want to take a moment to discuss what this means for our list profile. And mostly, I want to address the general topic of conversation that I've seen in the comment sections, which I've really enjoyed reading in my previous videos. So the immediate elephant in the room has been that for all appearances, West Coast look like they're neglecting the list needs for a top end inside mid to go with all the recent talent who we've picked up over the last 3 years. And there's been a lot. Right off the bat, I do want to say that I'm totally on board with this line of thinking. And for most of this year, I've actually really wanted to see us get Cooper Duff-Tytler along with Dyson Sharp with those first 2 picks, just since we all knew that the Oscar Allen compensation was going to come through and it's not really been a secret. You'll probably find lots of comments like this from me back for months now in my videos. However, 2 things. Firstly, you can't ignore best available talent at the top of the draft. And what's happened in recent weeks, months, is that Willem Dersma clearly is that top-end talent. He's separated himself. And so is Cooper Duff-Tytler, out of the non-affiliated players, that is. So for those who would have preferred, say, the Dersma-Sharp combo, let's say you didn't particularly want the ruck. But secondly, and most importantly, something really crazy, and this is the more important of those 2 factors when I explain why we're not going down this path. Something really interesting has happened this off-season that completely changes our needs, and that is the availability of senior midfield talent suddenly flooding the market for free. So after 3 years of having a desperate, undermanned midfield, both in talent and experience, for some weird reason, a whole bunch of solid complementary mids have entered the market. And they're all going to get picked up by us. I'll talk about those. You'll remember 2 years ago, we really wanted Devon Robinson just to bring some of the heavy lifting in the midfield and complement our talent. We weren't talking about him in the Chad Warner or even how we talked about Tim Kelly years ago. We were talking about someone who we needed to fill and complement that midfield. Well, he's coming for free now, which we know. And then on top of that, apparently Harry Schoenberg, who I'm really excited about, is also coming to us. And we do know that Finn McRae is also confirmed to come across to West Coast, all for free. So while these guys aren't our starting midfield, just those guys aren't collectively going to be 1, 2, and 3 in there. They're exactly what we need to come in alongside the midfield talent that we already have. Guys like Harley Reid and Tim Kelly will be able to play to their strengths again. I expect Tim Kelly's going to have a really good year next year, by the way. And as far as top-end talent goes, we do have Elijah Hewitt, Bo Allen, and a lot of other promising youngsters ready to take a spot in that part of the ground long term. And then hopefully we can still aim to get, let's say, 15 games out of a fit Elliot Yeo next year, who apparently has come back to training looking really good. Although James Glenn in the comments section, at James Glenn, said that's about as reliable as him saying he's only going out for 2 beers, which I did think was a pretty good analogy, but I'm still hopeful. Anyway, I hope no one minds the little tangent that I've run off on at the start of this video, but I really wanted to address the elephant in the room before draft night tomorrow, just to give some perspective to why the talent we're bringing in this year will end up complementing a side that is about to see a lot of the young talent go up a level and fill a whole bunch of list gaps that we have had over the last 3 years. So I guess what I'm saying is, don't let the PTSD trauma of the last 3 years and where the gaps have been confuse the fact that we are filling them, just not in the way that you might have hoped. Moving on to pick 13, like I keep saying, this is quite possibly the most pointless to predict going into the draft. So I'm just going to cover who we've been attached to without saying anything's too firm. As it stands, looking at all the bids that will come in, the pick is going to slide almost all the way back to pick 20. In fact, Cal Toomey's Bantam draft had it at pick 19 just yesterday and today. And then the name that he attached to West Coast at this point was Bo Adensol. But I encourage everyone just to take predictions like that with a grain of salt. This year's draft, honestly, has the largest number of variations I've seen in years, meaning that when one thing steps out of line, everything falls out further, and then every pick that goes on, that's going to happen even more. I know Toomey actually said that I'm gettable past pick 6, apparently, but I have been saying this for the last couple of videos that I've put out. And we've also been attached by commentators to guys like Lockie Dovison, which is the Little Wizard replica in this year's draft, Josh Lindsay, which would be great, and Harley Barker, who I actually think is probably, if I'm going to take a punt, a very low reliability punt with that pick. I'd say Harley Barker's my best guess. Him being a top-end wingman talent who is going to slide down the draft because he did an ACL. So he'd be an excellent fit for us and quite possibly there when that pick comes around. So that's the best I can give you. Anyway, the fun part from here is mapping who else we're committed to taking beyond that first round, which, by the way, is now, I think I said it last video, is now almost guaranteed to be the first draft ever where the first round takes up more than half the picks or more than all the other rounds combined. So it looks like it'll be about 30-something on round 1 tomorrow night, and then the next night will be far less than that to get through the rest of the draft. The recent scenarios that I've seen floated have a bid coming for Tyler Williams in the 20s. I think Kaltoumi said mainly because Fremantle have a pick there and he's from WA and they're probably interested. I'm not actually sure this happens, but I am pretty confident that we take Tyler Williams at the draft one way or another by matching that or hopefully having it fall further down. We've also made the statement at some point in the last couple of months that our Next Generation Academy and father-son prospects are players that we're all interested in all the way through every one of them, but without any promises. And I think what this means is that we do plan to take them unless one of 2 scenarios happens. A, the guys that we're not as wedded to receive a bid too early. So let's say we want to take them, but then someone bids on them in the 20s, and it's not Tyler Williams, and we're just like, look, we wanted the guy, but not for that price. I think that's unlikely. B, and I think this is the more likely scenario, is someone that we really like in the draft is around when our late picks start to arrive, and we snap them up with our available picks, which means list spots. And then there may not be a spot for, say, 1 or 2 of the guys that we've said we'd like to have in our list. I think this is actually relatively likely, just given how even and ambiguous this draft is beyond that top 10. By that I mean that no clubs really have an idea of who else rates who. apparently. So there's a very good chance that someone we rate really highly comes all the way through to some of the later picks. A bit like how we talked about Noah Long. I remember seeing a draft discussion by West Coast, some behind-the-scenes footage come out that we rated him in the 20s that year, and we picked him up at pick 57. Anyway, for me personally, I think the guy that we have in mind when I say this is Tom Blamiras. He's the 23-year-old VFL midfielder. He's been linked to us, by the way, who just won Young Talent of the Year in the VFL. He's another reason I don't think we're going to be desperately undermanned for midfield options next year if we get him, because I think there's a decent chance that happens and he comes across to West Coast. Beyond that, I do think we will be able to have our cake and eat it too by picking up the rest of our NGA players and father-son, that's Charlie Banfield, at the back end of the draft or even afterwards during the rookie listing period. So all in all, that should include, like I said, Willem Dersma and Cooper Duff-Tytler at the start of the draft, and then right at the back end, guys like Kobe Evans, Wes Wally, Charlie Banfield, and after Tyler Williams' pick, which is still possibly going to receive a bid before we have a pick to grab him as well. And then, like I've mentioned, there's some guys that are senior mids that we'll be picking up as well. So let's just take a look at where that leaves us at the end of the trade and draft periods. Firstly, I think our backline's probably going to be a major strength. Just bringing in guys like Brandon Starcevich and Tyler Young, who is, I think, really underrated. Getting those guys through just to complement the existing players that we already had back there will make it a strong part of the ground. I think the midfield will have a heap of emerging talent suddenly push their way right forward into that role and not be floundering. So along with the senior guys who we already have, hopefully getting more games under their belt next year, they'll also be complemented by a whole new crop of experienced heavy lifters coming in. So Dev Robinson, for one, is an absolute tough nut who will be great in a supporting role in there. But then there's also Harry Schoenberg, who I think is a massive underachiever at Adelaide for reasons that I could mention. Maybe I just hope that he comes across to WA, turns over a new leaf by focusing purely on football and getting out of South Australia where maybe he didn't quite reach his potential. So I think that's a bigger pickup than people would think if we do get him, which apparently we are. Up forward, we've already seen the new wave of talent come through. And don't forget, Jake Waterman comes back in after missing a large chunk of the year. So guys like Dersma and Duff-Tytler in particular, they'll have very little pressure as they come into the side to make an immediate impact, which I think is what everyone's worried about them not being able to do early next year, just given how bad our last few years has been. So aside from everyone I've mentioned today, I expect there could be 2, maybe 3 names not mentioned that surprise their way onto the list over the next couple of days at the draft. Probably, I don't know, 3 is probably the max, but I don't think so. And I think that'll be really exciting to have a look at post-draft. My personal prediction now, zooming out on everything we've just covered, is to expect significant improvement in the AFL side, as well as a really sudden leap into finals from the Waffle side next year, which will be really great for all the young talent that'll be really cutting their teeth down there. So don't get too caught up with all the top-end talent inside midfielders that we're probably not going to get our hands on tomorrow night. It'd be great to see us get Dyson Sharp, Sullivan Roby, and Sam Grulge with the first 5 picks in the draft, but we don't have that many picks. But our needs are nowhere near as desperate as they've been in recent years at the draft, which is probably one of the things I'm trying to really push in this video. Anyway, that wraps up my coverage for the day. I hope everyone enjoyed this last-minute preview and is just as excited for the draft night tomorrow as I am when it finally arrives. I'll be back again after all the drafts, meaning not just the draft, but the rookie listing period and everything. And when they're finalised, I'll give a final review of everyone we've brought in. And then after that, I'm really looking forward to making the series on players to watch and get excited about next year in 2026, which was the first thing I did late last year when I started this channel. So hopefully I'll see all of you for those. Enjoy the draft, and cheers until then.